Hello, and welcome to episode number 261 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. We are back from our top 50 episode, and we are just rolling into the station. You know that phrase, all gas, no brakes. It is just so loud here in the studio with one Neilan Niker, the orange tank.
Hello.
Mark Basada, the green tank.
Hello.
And joining us to make it the hot mess that it truly deserves is Christina. Should I say your last name?
Sure.
Christina Nuven, the blue tank.
Hello. How come you called Mark Marca Basada?
Yes, he's adding a little bit of spice to it.
It's actually how you pronounce it.
Yeah. I'm half Italian.
It doesn't say too well of you, Christina, that you didn't know that this whole time.
Yeah. I thought you were my friend.
This is a board game podcast, in case you didn't know from the countdown of hundreds of games and the title Board Game Barrage. We talk about board games, a.k.a. the latest hotness. And here we are with all of our friends talking about losing and board games. We have a feature topic. We are going to talk about our board game resolutions this year, and we're going to stick to them. That's the problem with this podcast. We have no gumption.
No accountability.
We don't stick to anything. But before we do that, we have got an all-star lineup of games. We are going to talk about Challengers, ! Nana, 11, and a upcoming Kickstarter, that is already released by now, Zoo Vadis, with no question mark.
And for clarity's sake, the games are Nana and 11.
What did it sound like?
It sounded like you were saying Nana 11.
That's cool.
That is cool.
It all rolls together. I mean,
It's hard to argue that isn't cool, but
you know the number one rule of cool, Mark. Are you ready?
yeah.
If you have to explain it, it's not cool anymore.
Point out when you're cool.
Okay, that's a rule I live by. This is effortless. Let's talk about the order because we forgot to do that before we started.
Well, I guess that could just be the order, as you said it, I suppose, right?
Yeah. Mark, tell us.
That's not Challengers.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Well, that's not how it's written here. So I saw a list of 4 things and I read it out of order.
Oh, perfect.
Amazing.
As people normally
That's how
do.
my brain works.
Is there any way that you could not shout?
I can't tell if this is a joke.
It's not a joke. My ears hurt.
You could take one out and then
But then I
sort of...
can't hear them. It's the same problem with the volume.
I mean, I could turn off. Okay, so here's a little thing for the listeners. Okay, pros. Okay, if you're an amateur podcaster or radio DJ, you need to have feedback on.
Yeah.
So
Which one are you?
what's happening right now is I can hear myself. I love to hear myself. Okay, in the monitor. Okay, so you see a musician, like a rock star, and they put their hand on their ear, they're listening. Like that's
you
me.
can't see this, but Kellen, the entire podcast record, has his hand on. He has his eyes closed.
Lead
as he's
guitarist.
talking.
Mm-hmm. Lead guitarist, I would say, sort of me.
Wait, so who's the rest of the band? Wait, you can't just say that without...
Yeah.
Yeah,
who's the rest of the
that's
band?
true. Let's all map to the Beatles.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
We've done this before, actually, and you don't want the answer.
Don't want to know the answer.
You don't want to remember the answer.
This is why you're not invited anymore. And Christina is saying, wow, I can hear you in real life, and I can't hear because all I can hear is you in the reference monitor. Is that right?
Yeah, you talk really loudly in general. And so
I'm animated.
This seems like an independent of the podcast problem.
Okay, so this is a sacrifice that I am willing to make for Christina. This is a one-time offer. I'll turn off my monitor, but I'm saying that my radio voice is definitely going to get worse.
listeners, you tell us.
God.
Is his voice worse from this point on?
I can't even hear how good this sounds. This is
delicious silence.
Oh my God. All right. So, okay. Well, we can blame it on Christina.
If it really bothers you, you can turn it
it's
back
fine.
on.
It's fine. Okay. Mark.
No.
Neilan.
No. Neilan. Okay.
I want Mark, actually, to tell us about
Tell us
challenges.
about challenges. Yeah.
Mark, Neilan, tell us about your game of Challenger.
Challengers! ! This is a deck building round robin style tournament game at its heart. This is a very neat game that I was very pleasantly surprised by because I'd heard a lot of buzz about it. I read the rules and was like, I don't know about this, because at its core, what the premise of Challengers is that it's a deck builder, where the crux of the game is that you are, if you're not familiar with the deck builder, over the course of the game, you start with a basic starter deck, everyone's is the same, and you add cards to that deck to differentiate it from other players. But the game that you're playing with that deck is largely automated, which is to say that once you've built your deck, you shuffle it up, and when you're playing against another player, of which you'll play a series of 7 matches over the course of the game, that deck largely plays itself. There are builds you can make that give you some agency, but that's kind of neither here nor there. So what happens is you will play a series of 7 matches with all of the other players at the table, and one of the things that's quite neat and novel about Challengers is that it plays up to 8 players, and I dare say it's probably best at that count. The game that we played was 6 players, and it largely plays simultaneously in a way that doesn't introduce that much downtime, even if you have that many players. Between every round of the game, you're going to choose a couple of cards to add to your deck, and those cards that you're adding to your deck will get more powerful over the course of the entire game. So in round 1, I might be adding 2 A cards to my deck, which are the weakest cards. Then I play a match, and that match is going to be dictated by this preordained order against Kellen. Kellen and I face our decks off against each other. If Kellen wins, he will get a trophy. I go home with nothing. Then we go another round of deck building, and I might be adding slightly more powerful cards to my deck this round. Then I play a match against Christina. Christina and my deck face off against each other. But at the same time, Kellen is now playing another match with Mark. So these matches, these little duels are just happening in parallel around the table, which is hilarious.
Deck duels?
Yeah, little deck dueling shenanigans.
I thought Mark was leaning away for the laugh, but he was yawning. He kept talking about you and I having deck duels.
So Kellen and I match against each other to find out whose deck is bigger. And this is happening like simultaneously around the table. If you're playing this with an even player count and an 8-player count, let's say, there are 4 matches happening simultaneously. And what's kind of funny about that is like you just get like the frantic silliness of seeing people like cheer for their deck. Because again, most of what you're doing when this game plays itself is you're revealing the top card of your deck until you beat the other opponent's position, and then they keep revealing the top card of the deck until they beat your position. It's this little tug of war that goes back and forth until someone's deck runs out, and then that player loses. One of the things that's also quite neat about that little mini game is your deck can also run out if you have too many different types of cards. So you're incentivized to keep card types to a minimum. So there's a little bit of play up there by getting powerful cards or getting cards that you already have repeats of, because if you lose a repeat of a card, that doesn't count against that 7 loss limit. I hope that makes sense. But regardless, there are a couple little considerations that come to play where you're building this deck, but the game you're playing against each other is dead simple. And mostly the joy is just in watching everyone do this at the same time and seeing who wins, seeing who loses. Oh, Mark's deck seems super strong. He's won 3 tournaments in a row, and then you match up against Mark and you beat him. It's got all those sort of like highs and lows that I used to love about Magic the Gathering tournaments. And in fact, Kellen remarked this on our game. It reminded us both of Millennium Blades, which is another game that tries to recreate like a Magic the Gathering style tournament. For what it's worth, I like this more than Millennium Blades. I think Millennium Blades is a more gamery game, but it's maybe too heavy for how silly those matchups feel. But Challengers just kind of feels light and breezy. It's very accessible. Everyone can get into it. It's almost like a gamer's party game. And I kind of dug that about it.
Is part of the game like being able to focus on your mini tournament or on your match while everybody else is having their, like, it sounds very hectic.
That's the thing. I think that's kind of what's clever about the design, is that there's not that much you really have to think about while you're playing. So yeah, it's fairly easy to do that, to be honest.
Sorry, you did say this is auto chess, but in board game form, right?
I did not. And that's something that was interesting is like I hadn't made that connection in my head actually until Kellen pointed it out on the day. And that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, it's largely about lining up your deck and then watching it play out in a series of parallel matches. So if you're familiar with auto chess or auto battlers as a video game genre, some of this will sound familiar.
It's hard to even describe it in a way that is as novel as it actually is to play, because you're sort of going back and forth between this. Get 2 more cards for your deck. See if it works. Get 2 more cards for your deck. Battle someone else. See if it works. Come on down to my arena. oh my God, my deck is terrible. I went on a winning streak and won, I think, 3 or 4 in a row.
Yeah.
And then I proceeded to lose every game after that. So I had built a deck that was very strong in the upfront rounds, but did not sustain me to the end. And then at the very end, whoever has the highest victory point total faces off to find out who the winner is in the arena. I can see this working really well as like a first game for a big group of people to play, kicking off a game night. It does work better, I believe, with even numbers of players.
Yeah.
So there's a dummy player implementation, but that would be for, as mentioned, dummies.
I should point that out, that the game does provide a means to have like a bot player to fill out 2 even players. But yeah, obviously, if you can play this with even players, you should, so that every match you're playing against is with an authentic player. And because it's always 7 matches before you get to the final, that's kind of why I feel like the 8 player almost just feels like the perfect player count for this. You play every other player once, and then whoever is the best goes on to the finals.
Couple questions. What is the conceit of the game? Like, what are you actually doing? What's the theme?
I mean, it's almost
Question
doesn't
for
matter, which is
dummies.
why I didn't mention it. It's capture the flag for some reason.
Okay.
But really what that means is like literally you have characters in your deck, and then when my character gets the flag, it now goes onto you onto the attack to take the flag from me. But like, again, that theme is meaningless even in the context of capture the flag. There's no spatial element to this. It's just numbers on cards getting bigger. And that's actually something I should emphasize. Every card is basically just its strength, and some of them have special powers. And that becomes more important as the game goes, and you try to synergize your deck together with cards you drafted earlier. But yeah, again, I can't emphasize how simple the game itself that you're actually playing really, really is.
And I know you said you played it at 6 and that you feel like ideally you want bigger player counts or higher player counts you play it. Do you think that this falls off a cliff in terms of like how enjoyable it would be at 2 or 3?
I would not even want to play
Okay.
at less than 4 players. And even then, I think like if we had 4 players, I don't know. I just can't imagine it would be as much fun.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like, but I just wanted to clarify. Yeah.
But yeah, that is Challengers. Challengers. Very, very pleasantly surprised with this. Had a great time with it. Go in knowing it's silly. Go in, like I said, knowing that it's effectively a party game where you can't get too invested in the stakes of it. But again, it's a game it's a party game built around more traditionally gamer mechanics, and that is Challengers.
All right, what's next? Is it 11 Nana or Nana 11?
It's 11. Speaking of games about matches, I'm going to be talking about 11. So 11 by Thomas Jensen and published by Portal Games is, as it says on the cover, a football manager board game. So while you are playing the football matches themselves, 11 is more about running the team, sort of both as a general manager, as it's termed in the US, or maybe director of football operations is what you would call it overseas, and as the manager / coach, again, to use the American nomenclature there. The way this works mechanically is the game is split up into 6 rounds, each of them concluding with your match of the week. So you're playing 6 weeks of the season. And then there are 4 turns per week before the match that's representing the club's operations during the week, where you're doing the majority of your actions. So the first day is Monday, and there you'll be doing your team's upkeep, or you're going to be paying the salaries. And you're also taking a meeting with the board of directors, which is the first injection of randomness in this game. So these weekly Monday board meetings are represented by cards, of which you'll deal with 1 per week. They're going to represent some sort of dilemma that the team is dealing with off the field, and 3 possible ways to deal with it, each of them with its own ramifications on the team. And the way you handle these issues is not with a choice you make. So you're not presented with a choice of 3 options and you pick one and that's how it affects your team. After all, you are sort of like the general manager, coach. You're not on the board. So what you do is you roll a die, and depending on who is on your board of directors, you'll generate a result. And your board consists of 3 people that you'll draft at the beginning of the game, and they each have their own leanings. So some are more concerned with the team's finances, others are more concerned with the product in the field, and each of them give you their sort of own bonuses. So that's Monday, upkeep and dealing with the board. After that, there's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, which are the 3 turns where you're actually doing the most of your team management. On those days, you're going to be recruiting staff, you're going to be upgrading your facilities, you're going to be adding sponsors, and of course, most importantly, you're going to be adding players to your team and hopefully trading them up. The way that this works is through purchasing cards from an array. So the interesting part about this is that most of these arrays that have like staff or sponsors or players have 5 cards face up, but you only choose from the last 3 of them, so you can see what's coming up later in the tableau. You don't have a choice of 5, you have a choice of 3, but you can see what's coming up. So if you really need a goalie and none are available now, you can see if one is coming up later. If you really need a doctor, your team has a lot of injuries and there's no doctors available now, you can potentially see if one will be there to hire soon. After that, you get to the actual game itself. And this is another interesting aspect of the game. You have a card representing your opponent for the week, which describes their formation and a little blurb about how they're doing in the season and sort of like what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. And then you arrange your players to, defend their strengths or to exploit their weaknesses or just play your own game, whatever you want to do. And then you flip the card over to see how they're actually going to play you in that game. And each team has 5 or 6 different cards, which are identical on that blurb side, but when you flip them over, they're all different. So teams have a general way of playing, but they can actually play you in different ways. So you're never sure about how they're going to play against you. You just have a general idea. And then, you actually play the game. So figuring out how the match itself resolves is pretty straightforward and in my eyes, pretty satisfying. More about that a little later, but after the match resolves itself, you roll another die. Again, this is another die roll. Notice that there's no dice rolling in the actual game itself. There is that luck of what the team is actually going to do, but the actual match itself is very deterministic. But then you roll a die after a match, and that's like a special event that happens after every game. Like somebody might get injured, or you might get a bonus or whatever. A word about the dice rolls. One of the 4 stats that your team has is a resource that allows you to reroll dice, so there's mitigation there. The other stats you have are how much money your team makes, if you can take extra actions, and also how well you do at fielding your team. So those are the four basic stats. Okay, so that's how 11 plays. What did I think about it? Well, okay, big caveat here. I'm a huge football/soccer fan. Listeners of the show will already know this, but case in point, I literally got up at 4 a.m. this Saturday to watch my team, Liverpool, play to a 0-0 draw, which I have to tell you, even as big as a Liverpool and a soccer fan I am, is a rough situation to be in, but I do that kind of stuff. I say this all to say that I am the target audience. You could not get more target audience than me in this game. I'm always on the hunt for good soccer board games and sports board games in general, and the problem I usually have with them is that they try to be too simulation-y. They try to recreate the game, every pass, every shot, whatever the sport is. And it gets too rote and too mechanical. Okay, I roll for this pass, I check this pass. It gets just too much of that. And I'm really, really happy with how Portal handled the games itself, the matches themselves. They take about 10 minutes to resolve, and they are abstracted, but they feel exciting and satisfying. The other thing that I look for in board games recreating sports is the opportunity to play against my opponent in a way that feels like it might be like a sport against someone. And here, I have to say that 11 fails a bit. It's not that the game is a bad multiplayer. It's that it's just, for me, very multiplayer solitaire. There are added rules for, playing your team versus your opponent's team, but without those added rules in the regular standard game, you're never playing against the person you're playing with at the table. You're both playing against the same teams in the league. The only interaction in a multiplayer game is them taking staff or players ahead of you, taking the player you want or the staff you want. But even then, you don't ever feel like you're crushed because somebody took a player. There's always a way to get around it. And so the multiplayer aspect of it feels very doing your own thing.
Actually, quick question about that, Mark. So does that mean that, for example, in resolving another player's match, are you just watching that player resolve their match against an AI, or you can mostly do it simultaneously?
You do it simultaneously.
Okay.
I mean, you could do it if you wanted to heighten the excitement and see how.
Sure.
But for the most part, you can do it simultaneously.
Okay.
How is that soccer team playing 2 teams at once, Mark?
Yeah. There's a couple of leaps of logic you have to deal with when it comes to this game. But anyhow, that said, all those leaps of logic set aside, I am also looking to get more into solo games this year, and as a solo game, I really, really enjoyed my play of 11. It comes with a number of scenarios, and these are our little mini campaigns, and those have been really, really fun. I have even gone through one, and I was posting my match-to-match updates on our Patreon-only Discord, and people seem to be getting a kick out of that, and it was a really fun, exciting experience. I really felt like I was managing a team while not being harassed in super minute details. It's snappy while being interesting, and as I said, the games themselves do feel exciting while being quick to resolve. So, that's basically where I land on 11. I think if you're interested in soccer and solo gaming, then this is a pretty unreserved recommendation. Get this game. Even if you're a sports fan who's into solo games, I think this is a gotta try, probably buy. But If you're primarily looking for a multiplayer experience, then it's more difficult to recommend. Which brings me to folks who probably make up the majority of this listening audience, which are people who are looking for multiplayer experiences. Would I recommend it to them? I don't know. I probably wouldn't, honestly. And that's so hard for me to say given how much I personally enjoyed it as a solo game and would recommend it to like fans of sports and solo gaming. But it's just, I think if you're looking for a multiplayer experience, even if you're looking for a sports experience, I feel like there are better games out there. Again, solo soccer, solo sports, fantastic. It's just multiplayer. It just feels like you're doing your own thing. And I think there's better multiplayer experiences for people looking for a sports sort of like feeling. Last thing I'm going to say is I got this game with a number of expansions through the GameFound Kickstarter, or I guess it's not a Kickstarter, it's a GameFound release. I played this without any of the expansions. I'm trying to make this review like having to do with the retail product. But I will say that I think this game has like the greatest, for me, greatest component of any board game ever, which is, and this may be a GameFound only exclusive, which is these green felt soccer fields where you put your players on. It's just, for a soccer fan, it's just like I was blown away. When I opened it up and I saw that, I was like, oh my God, this is hitting me like square in the heart, like perfectly for me.
Felt?
Yeah, green felt.
Just like soccer?
I mean, it looks like a pitch. It looks like a field. It looks like a field. It was amazing.
Also specifically there, right, it's like reminiscent of like a certain era of like tabletop soccer games.
Yeah,
like stuff
sure.
like Sabuto, right, where you had these giant like felt mats and stuff like that. So I can absolutely see how that would resonate.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's 11 by Thomas Jensen and Portal Games.
I've never felt more apart from you, Mark.
How's that?
The whole review about, you know, if you like soccer and you hate people and you really like playing with yourself and you love green felt.
That's me. You just described me in 4 sentences.
All right. We are going to go 4 spaces down to Nana.
Na.
He's trying to set me up.
Bait you.
What do you mean 4 spaces down,
That's
Kellen?
right. My extensive knowledge of Japanese and a Google search leads me to know that Nana means 7 in Japanese. Okay. Nana is a very trendy, very hot card game from Japan right now that Codename from our Discord gifted to me. Thank you, friend. And I have the Christmas edition, so I'm more exclusive than even those of you who have imported Nana. And it is a take on none other than Go Fish.
None other than?
None other than Go Fish. And in this game, there is a set of cards, 1 to 12, and everyone gets a hand of them. There are 3 of each card, and you arrange them in ascending order in your hand, and you are looking for sets of 3. And you might say, how do you do that? How is this like Go Fish? I could say, Mark, show us your lowest card. And then Mark puts his lowest card out on the table. And then I have to find the other 2 twos. Let's say that that's a 2. And there's a set of cards in the middle, just like a memory game, that I could choose one from the middle and flip it over. And if it's a 2, my turn continues. If it's not a 2, we flip it back face down. So you are allowed to show your card, either your highest card or your lowest card, and then ask each other player, can I see your highest card or can I see your lowest card? And you're trying to make a set of 3. If you get all 3, you collect that set.
Wait, so before you asked Mark to put out his lowest card, you had already put your lowest card in?
No, you can just start by like sort of getting information about the game.
Okay.
And then you win the game if you collect 3 sets. That the game is over. You win the game if your sets add or subtract to 7. So if you have the sets 4 and the sets 3, or the sets 12 and the sets 5, or you win the game if you get the 7s. If you get all 3 7s, you just win the game. And you might say, what? Why are the 7s so important? Well, the game is called Nana, you stupid person. In addition to that, the 7s are in the middle of your hand. So you're not going to be able to get to them. You can't just pick a card out of the middle of your hand and be like, I'm looking for the 7s. You can only ask people, I'm looking for your highest card. I'm looking for your lowest card. This is delightful. It's a trifle. Neilan, what did you think of Nana? It's hard to know what to think of Nana.
No, I really liked it. For what is an exceedingly silly, like you said, ultimately memory game that you could teach to, I don't mean this to be disparaging, but that you could teach to a 5-year-old. Like, it's really, really fun. No, I mean, genuinely. genuinely, I think we have a lot of associations with what bad memory games look like, but because there is that element of I know what's in my hand, and like I know what I'm working towards. I have 2 sevens in the middle of my hand, and I know that if I can get to them and find that lost 7, I can win. And like keeping that information secret and then trying to work around it, there's ways you can be a little bit misleading by sort of asking maybe something that you already know, or ending your turn before you reveal too much information. It's really fun for like how simple it is. Absolutely.
I think that everyone should try this. You can kind of do it with a set of cards, probably really easy to, but the version I have is delightful and has some like shiny card art on the 7s. Just a weird little thing that you can play in 15 minutes that I think will impress people. And if you have a bad memory like I do, it's astounding how bad you can be at a board game.
Made for 5-year-olds.
So this seems fun, but maybe not rising to the level of other card games like Scout or...
Oh, definitely not. But
it's light and fluffy.
Again, it's very trendy right now.
Okay.
It's like if you want to be in the conversation, like you would import Nana right now. Like that's what it feels like to me.
Okay.
And that is Nana. Christina, what do you got for us?
I am here to talk about Zoo Vadis, the one and only Zoo Vadis from the one and only true and living Dr. Reiner Knizia.
But before she starts, businessman caveat. Christina and I were paid. We were paid to play. That's pay to play, if you know that disclaimer. We were paid to play in a before you play playthrough video. How's that for a sentence? That was sponsored by Bitewing Games, the publishers themselves. We'll have a link to that in this episode. That will be on the Kickstarter page. This will have gone live tomorrow, but for you guys 2 days ago. So this Kickstarter is live. Christina and I were, again, paid to participate in one component of it, but that has nothing to do with what we're talking about now. But caveat adjourned, businessman.
We were paid.
We were paid. We just want to be clear that this podcast led to us receiving money, and that's okay.
All right. If the words Vadis and Knizia ring all sorts of bells for you, it's because you're right. There is a game called Quo Vadis, ? By Reiner Knizia, and it was released in 1992. So Quo Vadis is Knizia's take on a negotiation game, and Zoo Vadis is the reimagined version of that with new beautiful art and asymmetric player powers and a couple of other things that I'll talk about. But first, I just want to go over a couple things about the word Vadis.
Love it. Quo
Quo Vadis is Latin, and it means whither goest thou? Or you could just say, where are you going? ? So Zoo Vadis means
Where is the zoo?
that would actually make more sense. It means zoo you go. So this game is called Zoo You Go. But I think if we're really just looking at the heart of the meaning, it's where are you going within the zoo? So still, where are you going? Zoo Vadis. Like I was saying, this is Knizia's take on a negotiation game, which is to say that it is a super short, simple, streamlined version of a negotiation game. And in this new reimagined version, Zoo Vadis, there are asymmetric player powers and there are peacocks. So the goal of the game is to have the most laurels. So laurels are just victory points. You collect laurels as you're moving your animals through the zoo. You're ultimately trying to get to the star exhibit, which is the final space where your animals can land. Even if you have the most laurels, if you don't have at least one of your animals in the star exhibit at the end of the game, you cannot win. You are only eligible to win if at least one of your animals is in the star exhibit at the end of the game. The game ends immediately when all the spaces in the star exhibit are filled. The fun and funny thing about that is this idea of peacocks, or this new element of peacocks. So peacocks can be moved in the game by anyone, and peacocks can fill up the spaces in the end with other animals. So there will be people who are just locked out of the star exhibit, and they might have the most laurels. So it really is this interesting push and pull of making sure you're getting enough laurels and keeping people out of the star exhibit and making sure you're getting into the star exhibit. So it has this race element to it. But the most fun part of the game and kind of the heart of it is, of course, the negotiation. So How movement works is you can move your animals initially into spots for free, just at the very beginning. You get to move your animals in. But then to move out of these spots, and when you move over laurels, when you move to the next spot, that's actually how you're collecting the laurels, collecting victory points. And so the way to do that, the way to move in the game, is to get votes. You need to get majority votes based on the number of spaces and each exhibit. So each exhibit has a different number of spaces. If there are 3 spaces, you need 2 votes. You can count as one of the votes. So if you're there and one other person is there, you need your vote and you need their vote. You can also bribe peacocks if there are peacocks in the exhibit. And the way you do that is by giving them 2 laurels, but you can't just give them 2 single laurel tokens. You have to give them a token that has the number 2 on it or greater, and you don't get change. So that's a specific challenge, and you'll end up seeing people trading laurels as part of their negotiation. You'll trade a higher amount for a lower amount just to make sure you can bribe the peacocks. But essentially, if you're in here with another person, you have to convince them to let you move. And there are all sorts of fun ways to negotiate and fun things to negotiate with. When you're making a negotiation, that promise is binding, but future promises are not binding. So that's always fun as well. That is how the negotiation works. The other thing about this being majority of the spots is that if you get to a spot first, you can't just leave everyone behind. You need votes in order to move up toward the star exhibit. And again, you can use peacocks, but you would have to move peacocks. You'd have to take your turn to move a peacock in if there were no peacocks already in that exhibit. So you need to work with other people. It forces these negotiations to happen. And the other thing to note is that there's always something that you can do on your turn. You're never just going to have to get locked out of a negotiation or skip your turn. There's always something you can do, because if you want, you can just literally move a peacock and block someone. There are lots of little things like that. So last thing is the animal abilities. The abilities are pretty, I would say, I don't want to say minor, but they're not like game-breaking abilities. The main conceit here is that you cannot use your ability for yourself. An example of a player power is one of the animals can bring a player with them. That one is very obvious. You can't use it for yourself. You have to use it as part of your negotiation tactics, essentially. There are other powers that you wish you could use yourself. Like one of the player powers is taking these little shortcuts. You can't use it yourself, but you can give it to somebody else and hope that they'll give you something in return, or just make it part of your negotiation so that you get their vote. So that is Zoo Vadis. Kellen, what did you think?
Oh, you don't want to talk to Neilan?
Oh, yeah. Neilan played it too. Neilan, what did you think?
Yeah, no.
I'd rather hear what Neilan thinks. I already know what you think.
No, that goes without saying. One of the things that surprised me actually was like I realized only after the fact that I had played Quo Vadis, but for whatever reason that didn't stick with me. It's not an especially enticing looking game. Zoo Vadis is lovely. I think like the things that it adds to the game are not just cosmetic or minor. They grease the wheels of negotiation in ways that are really fun. The powers feel important because suddenly you have another little negotiation chip in your corner, right? Like I have 2 uses of this power, and like, hey, Christina, wouldn't it be really, really cool if you could just skip from that cage here right now? Hey, buy my power, and then maybe we can like work something out like in the long run. And then suddenly Christina and I have a little minor alliance for who knows how long, and who knows how long that lasts. But meanwhile, I know I actually have a leg up on Christina because of something else that I'm working out with another player, just because of my board state. So it just does that awesome thing of like encouraging you to sort of make deals with everyone while helping yourself get ahead. It is ultimately, at the end of the day, a competitive game, and you're not going to be helping someone unless you know you can beat them in the end. And everything about that I just found lovely. I thought the presentation was great. Super cool.
I think the one thing we haven't said is that voting yes to let someone go gets you 1 victory point, 1 laurel, and so that helps grease the wheel. Like it doesn't just blockade up immediately. Like people are wanting to get those single victory points. I'm impressed by how open the negotiation is here, and I think that, you know, especially for people who are thinking about the Kickstarter, it really is simple to me. Like if you like negotiation, you should play this game and you would have fun playing it. Like Reiner does negotiation really condensed and really simple, but it does come with all the frailties of a negotiation game, you know, which is like you can get locked out through no fault of your own. People could team up in a way that feels unfair or not empowered towards you, and there's just nothing you can do about it. I think that For instance, I tend to, with groups of people that know me, just assume that I will lose negotiation games because it's really fun to with me. Like, really. And I mean that, like, in all... Like, I'm good at board games, and I am, like, epically bad whenever the gloves are off and people can do whatever they want. And that has proved true in all my games of Zoo Vadis. I do not know what the star exhibit is. That's a little bit of a spoiler alert, but and the intrigue of that is great, right? Because what happens is if someone gets too far ahead or is perceived to be too far ahead, you try to lock them out of the star exhibit. Like, no one should allow that person in, and that always leads to really silliness and fun. So I've played this at 4 and at 7 alongside a few plays of Quo Vadis, and I think it's going to be sweeter in the 5-6 player range than it was at 7. 7 felt a little bit too chaotic, like I didn't have enough control over what was happening. I still enjoyed it a lot. I'm happy I have a pre-production copy, which I'm sure is going to be asked for back. And I don't know the pricing or how the components will work, but they are like really, really cute. It's really well done from a production perspective.
Speaking of cute production, I remember playing the original version of this way back when, Quo Vadis. It has a pretty awful production. It's very, very like old Euro-y looking. I think the pawns were these little plastic stick things. Anyhow, I also remember that was a game where you only want to play it at 4 or 5. And I remember it being one where you really wanted everybody to be into negotiation. And I was a little worried when Zoo Vadis was announced, when the player powers were announced, because Quo Vadis has no player powers. Quo Vadis is just all negotiation. I was worried that was going to make the game like a little too modern Euro-y and sort of take away from the elegance of it. But in the way that you're explaining, Christina and Neilan, it seems like the powers, as you said, just add another component, another way to negotiate,
Yeah.
Because I remember my games of Quo Vadis really grinding to a halt at some points where just people were being obstinate. So yeah, I'm excited to try this out.
Yeah, I think the specific thing that it does that's quite clever is at every point in the game, someone's power is useful to you, right? So there's always some incentive to like have some friendly terms with everyone.
I also love how the powers, just as Christina said, benefit others. You can't use your power for yourself. That seems like a smart way to handle it.
Yeah, I have never played Quo Vadis, but I loved Zoo Vadis. I did horribly bad in one of my games, which that's a little bit of a spoiler, but you can see online. And then another of my games, I was doing really well. And it's that feeling when negotiations are going well. And like Neilan was saying, where you're making a good deal, but it's secretly like better for you for this reason that they don't know yet. It's just such a fun feeling, and then like seeing it all work out and building that momentum is just really fun, and it seems to happen pretty easily in this game. And yeah, to Mark's point, there are plenty of things to negotiate, even like I'll move that peacock for you if you do this thing for me. And again, it's like secretly moving the peacock helps you too. So it's just a really, really fun way to negotiate that doesn't feel that punishing, I would say, in comparison to something like I'm the boss that can sometimes feel like you're just getting completely screwed. And that is Zoo Vadis. And we also just want to thank Monique and Naveen for inviting us to play this with them on their channel Before You Play. You can watch us play that game on their channel, and we will put a link to that in the show notes. So thank you, Monique and Naveen. And hopefully next time we play with you guys, you won't destroy us quite so much. Oops, too many spoilers. Now you don't have to go watch it.
Well, another spoiler is we're at Neilan's house in the video.
Neilan's not there.
Spoiler.
Wait, what?
What? He gave us his key, and I have a little wood engraving. It says Neilan on it, and I wanted to use the key, Neilan. Here it is. Jangle the keys in front of the mic. It's an audio format. That's the Neilan keys. All right. We have talked for too long. 4 games this time instead of 3, even though 2 of those games make 18. So let us go right into our board game resolutions.
Kellen does math now.
But you were smiling. It's an audio format, so I think your smiles don't translate, but there were smiles. We are going to talk about our board game resolutions, and we are going to talk about how to enforce them with each other, which is the critical problem. One would think that Neilan, as our discipline daddy, would have that on lockdown, but somehow we make resolutions, we make promises, and then we fail them. Okay? So we each get one resolution for board games. This is not because, I want to get buff too, so that I can get my Pokemon tattoos, but that's outside the scope of this podcast. Right. I've been told that over and over again. All right, who wants to kick off with their resolution as it relates to board games for the year 2023, the first year post-COVID?
So I'll start because I think I probably have in some ways the most boring resolutions. And I say resolutions pointedly there because, and Neilan might piggyback on this, because one way to think of a resolution is a challenge. And this is sort of a nod to the challenges you can set up on BG Stats. So this is an app.
What does that stand for?
So this is an app that I use to log my plays. As listeners know, I log my plays religiously. And one thing you can do on this app is you can also set challenges for the year. So last year I set, 15 challenges or something like that, different kinds of challenges. And it gives you progress. It tells you like how far you should be on the challenge. So if you're falling behind, given where you are in the year, or if you're...
How'd you do last year?
I did pretty good. There were some I fell short on, and some I succeeded in. But this year, I took it a step further. So I actually have, I'm not going to go through them here because it's going to be super boring, but I think I have on BG Stats something like 38 challenges to myself.
Okay.
So,
and you're striving for 100% this year.
I'm striving for 100%. I will not get 100%, but I'll just give you a quick overview of what the challenges are like, okay? So I have a 10 by 10, a 15 by 15, and a 20 by 20. For those who don't know, those are number of specific games that you've played a specific amount of time. So on a 10 by 10, I want to play 10 games 10 times. Okay. And so a 20 by 20 would mean 20 specific games each 20 times. That's unlikely to happen, but that's a set of challenges.
Here's the next level on that, Mark. Nothing in your 10 by 10 can also be in your 20 by 20.
No, that's never going to happen. That would never happen in a million years. Then I have a...
Wait.
Yeah. Go ahead.
That there can't be overlap. That's against the spirit of the
Exactly.
challenge.
That's what I would have thought.
Yeah, I don't know if that's... I don't think this is how BG Stats handles it, and I'm not willing to finagle it to make it work, but you can take it up with...
Why make resolutions that you can't keep?
No, I might be able to keep them. I'm way ahead of the... If you look at the progress bar, I have the progress bar up for all the viewers at home.
Oh, wow.
I'm very
Which
far
one is
ahead
that?
of your progress. Anyhow.
That middle one is just play one game.
That's right.
Yeah.
50% of the way through.
Playing one game unlocks 17 of your challenges.
Yeah. More about that later. Then I have a challenge for a number of games, like a total number of games played. I'm not going to say that out loud because it's embarrassing, the high number. Then I want to play 50 solo games, for example. There is an alphabet challenge I have, which is to play a game that starts with every letter of the alphabet. Alphabet challenge. Then I have a number of challenges, which is play 10 games from every year from 2000 to 2023.
Wow.
So every year based on publishing date. So for example...
Wait, 10 different games?
10 different
10
games.
Plays? Okay.
10 different games. So for example, I've got 3 already from 2004. Those are Ticket to Ride, St. Petersburg, and Goa. So those 3 of the 10 I've hit. So that's a number of challenges. Again, one for every year from 2000 to 2023. I've got play a certain number of games with BGB people, so the 4 of us. I want to play a certain number of games. People from Los Angeles, so like friends of mine from LA, I want to play a certain number of games. People in Las Vegas, a certain number of games. I want to play...
Wait, I have a question.
Yes.
If you play a game with us, does that count? Let's say we
Why
play
are
a
you
game
trying to make this so
at
hard? At
your house.
Game...
We play a game.
Yeah, go
we
ahead.
play a game at your house. Does that mark off that counts for LA people? It counts for BGB people, and it counts for in Nevada.
Nope.
No, it doesn't count for the Las Vegas people are separate, but it does count for BGB LA people and potentially a 10 by 10 or whatever. Christina wants everyone to be its own unique thing and wants to be
Every challenge
as hard as possible.
Yeah, none of your 2020 to 2023 games can count in your 20 by 20s or 10 by 10s.
Right, exactly. And then a couple other ones. I want to play a certain number of unplayed games, like Shelf of Shame, quote unquote games. Games that are new to me. So I want to hit a certain number of games that are new to me. Old favorites. So games that I have played before, but like older games that I haven't played in a while. And then the last 2 are play a game every day of the year, which is one that I failed early last year, but so far so good. And the last one is my H index. So many board game people out there will already be familiar with this, but your H index is basically the number of games you've played by that number. So for example, if I've played 10 games, each at least 10 times in my life, my H index number is 10. So to get that number to 11, I have to play 11 games 11 times and then 12 games 12 times. So it gets harder and harder as you step up. So I'm trying to hit my next step of my H index. My H index is currently 26. So in all the games I've ever played, I've played 26 games at least 26 times. I'm going to try to get to 27 or 28. And so that's another challenge. So those are my...
You get rid of a game, does that increase your H index?
No, it's total number of games across my lifetime. So for example, I've played X number of games, but I've played at least 27 of them 27 times, but I haven't played 28 times. That's what I'm trying to get to now. And that's what the H index number is. So that's like all the...
Podcast sponsored by
BG Stats. I wish it was. I would take their money. But those are the easy ones. Those are not the easy ones. Those are the clear ones. They're like black and white. The other thing I want to do in terms of board game resolutions is I want to, and I used to do this, and I think I had a resolution to do this last year and I completely failed on it, but I want to write down game notes about every game I played and like funny stories or things that happened because I used to do that regularly, and then looking back at those notes from 2015, 2014, are always really fun to look back at and try to remember, like, why did Kellen draw a hippopotamus with an apple in its mouth in code? Now, you wouldn't do it in code names, but in like Pictomania or something. So yeah, just these little notes, these little highlights I want to keep track of. So those are all my board game resolutions.
Wow. Well, that'll be the podcast for us. Thanks for listening. There's no more resolutions, Mark. What do you think we're supposed to do now? You took all of our possible resolutions. That's everything.
As soon as I said the words H index, I saw Kellen's face droop. I knew I'd take it.
Well, it is a strategy, right? Which is to just say that your resolutions are all possible resolutions.
Right.
And then near the end of the year, like, you've obviously fulfilled some portion of that.
Yeah.
But it's like, are there games that you want to play on Tuesdays or that contain exclamation marks in them? It's just like, what? At some point, I don't understand you at all.
I want everything quantified.
I want to understand what it looks like on BG Stats when you enter that you've played a game and it clicks off like 100 of your
That is
resolutions.
also very satisfying. I gotta say, that is satisfying. When you play a game and it goes
what does it look
Alphabet
like?
Challenge, 100 game challenge.
Does it like pop up?
They all pop up. Once you like submit your scores, then they get like a little pop up with all the achievements.
I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. See?
I want that.
It just makes a twice as clever sound over and over and over again.
That's kind of what I'm imagining.
I always admire these challenges, but like it's not that I know that they're not for me. I guess I just don't get the same thrill out of like aspiring to them to some extent. But our friend Dean, who hosts our regular game night, also does these challenges in the year, and it's always fun like as it gets towards the end of the year and he's frantically trying to like fill out his challenges. So I like being a part of that at least. But yeah, in terms of resolutions, I went back and listened to the last time we did this was 2 years ago, and as it kind of was the time before that, it's largely about cutting games, and that hasn't changed except with one very specific constraint I'm putting on myself, which is last time I did this, I was in a different apartment and I didn't really have set up like my board game space, my shelves or that. Since that point in time, I have a dedicated set of shelves that I told myself was going to be the place I was going to put the board games on. And that is not the reality that I now live in. I actually have a ton of board games all over the floor of that room, all over the floors and tables of other rooms. And the reality is I'm just not using that shelving space. I haven't done the thing that is the delight of having a board game shelf, which is sorting it and like making sure that everything up there is like nicely displayed. So that is my resolution, is to get my collection down to a nicely displayed and sorted shelf of games. And that was going to involve a lot of cutting. I've put 50 games on the Strategicon math trade, which, is a lot for me. Mark's like 50 is like amateur hour over here. But no, listing that many games was very enlightening for me. It kind of made me scared to count how many games I have in totality if I was willing to cut 50 of them. And honestly, without blinking, I was just like, oh yeah, that can go, that can go, that can go, that can go. And yeah, just the very real getting down to a space that is reasonable without having to have board games on the floor. That is my resolution.
Oh, there's not 37 of them. All right. I have a very simple resolution. And speaking of Dean, it was directly inspired by Dean. Dean's goal for the year is to play every game that he owns this year. But, and the good news of that, the but, is he can either play them or get rid of them. And I'm like, my light bulb went off. And Dean said this to me. So I have a shelf of shame, and my goal is to play every game on it this year. That's the most trite thing, but the other option is to get rid of the game. So Like, I could play 0 games. Do you see what I'm saying? And then on December, whatever the last day of December is,
What is it this
New
year?
Year's Eve?
No.
You don't know what New Year's
No one
I could
could
get
know.
rid
No
of-
one could know.
I could get rid of all of them, and then I will still be a success. And so, like I said, there are 92 things. 1906 San Francisco, 1920 Wall Street, 1987 Channing Tunnel, Four Gods, Allegory, and then we held hands, Antique or Ghost, Arcana Rising, Atlantic Robot League, Barony, Basket Boss, Before the Guests Arrive, Beyond Baker Street, Brazil Imperial, Brian Boru, Circle the Wagon, Coral Reef, Curious Cargo, Cusco, Demon Worker, Domain, Dragon's Interest, Dune, A Game of Conquest and Diplomacy, Dune, Chome,
We're not
and
doing
Reese
this for
expansion.
92 games.
Empire of the
This is
Stars,
too much.
Factory Funner, Fangs, Fantasy Realms Deluxe Edition, Firefly, Misbehaving, First in Flight, Free Ride, Goods Maker, Hail Hydra, Hitsy Road, Icky, It's 5 p.m., Izio, Lectio, Lifestyle, Luna Capital, Lunar Base, Magic Calligraphy, all one word, Maka Maka, Masters of Venice, Matcha, Maui, Mobile Markets, Moon Adventure, Matainai, Wutai Mountain, No Honor Amongst Thieves, Northwest Passage, Only One Collection, Pandora, Pecunia, Pirates of Skydock, Polynesia, Profiteers, Psychic, Pizza Deliverers, Go to Ghost Town, Pyramid's Dilemma, Raccoon Tycoon, Rapa Nui, Reputation, Rillium, Risk, Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies, Senji, Risk, Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies Edition,
Okay.
Senji, Shadows of the Sun, Sovereign's Chain, Spots, Spyfest, Arcadia Quest, Stock Hold'em, Stone Age, Strop, Struggle of Empires, Study in Emerald, First Edition, thank you, Mark, Summoner Wars, Second Edition, Super Mother Lode, TAC, The Court of Miracles, The East Concordat, The Game of Wolf, The Last Brave, The South Terminus, The West Ascendant, Tournaments at Camelot, Tower of Babel, Under Falling Sky, Vanuatu, Wild Space, Windward, Wise Guys, and Yura Penguin.
I love it.
We've played a couple of those.
Nah.
All right.
You've played Psychic Pizza Deliverers, Go to Ghost Town? Motainai Wutai Mountain is the expansion. All right.
Well, you didn't say the expansion name.
So
No, I did. Motainai Wutai Mountain.
I actually want to get something. I want to get something clear about what your goal is here, Kellen. On December, whatever date could possibly be
31st.
the end of the year,
Yeah.
you will get rid of the games that you haven't played. Is that your commitment
That-
to us?
He's
That's right.
promising. Yeah.
Either
Okay.
they will have been played or someone's getting a lot of games.
I have another clarifying question. This is obviously your shelf of shame as of today.
That's right.
As your shelf of shame grows, does it add to this list and you also have to, play those?
Okay. I get what you're saying. And let's institute
It's a good question.
the July principle.
Okay, anything before July gets added to the
Anything
list?
Before July gets added to the list.
Wait, what day?
Anything
What day
after
in July?
Yeah.
The
So
first-
on whatever the last day of
America's
July is.
birthday, the 4th of July.
Okay.
Don't even send me anything until after that, publishers.
On whatever the day after America's birthday is, we're going to get just like 100 games shipped to our house.
Perfect. This is a good goal.
I think it's a very good goal.
93 things.
It's the sort of thing that I tell myself that like I want to be better at, because I have those games that obviously have sat on my shelf forever, and I was like, I should get rid of this because I know I'm not going to play that. And I think like committing yourself to actually having a very specific target and a time and a kill date, as it were, is perfect.
Okay, let's make bets for how many of them will be gotten rid
92.
of.
I do think it'll be over half easily is out the door. Christina, now it's your turn.
All right. Well, my resolution is very short and sweet. It was about 30 seconds of Mark's spiel. Then we can just like cut that and put it here. Kind of. Well, no, it is. It's literally one of your challenges, except it's a little bit more specific. So all I want is to play games with the three of you in person at least once per quarter this year. And I think we're going to start off strong because we have Dice Tower West. So that's the first quarter, which is kind of like making a to-do list and like adding things you've already completed to-do list, which I always do because it's really satisfying to write stuff and immediately cross it out. So that's kind of what Dice Tower West
And also,
is. for
don't
this
worry,
resolution.
Christina, because you weren't here when we established all the games that we're going to be playing at Dice Tower West. So we have them all lined up.
We have an extensive list already ready to go.
And how many challenges do those mark off for Mark's
Oh, it's too many to
challenge
count.
list?
They sort of like cascade on each other.
That's what I want to see. I want to see the cascading.
There you go.
The woohoos. And that's it. That's my short and sweet New Year's board game resolution.
What about for the non-business people? Can you explain what a quarter is?
I think everybody knows what a quarter is, Kellen.
Well, I don't want to assume.
Well, you're the Mr. Businessman disclaimer businessman. You explain it.
That would be a 3-month period, would be a quarter.
And how many quarters are in a year, Kellen? Mr. Math.
Yeah. All right. And that is going to do it for this episode. The first back for the new year that is not a top 50. We are back and we are all gas, no breaks. Thank you so much for listening to Board Game Barrage. You can find us in all forms of social media at boardgamebarrage.com. You can come chat with us on Discord. You can hang out with us on Facebook. You can hang out in the Board Game Geek Guild. You can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. Special thank you to Heart Society for their song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album, Wake the Queens. So long and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
We're coming to Neilan's house. Hello, this is Kellen on microphone number 1.
That sounded pre-recorded.
Thank you. Now do you.
Oh, hello. This is Christina on microphone number 2.
Okay, so then we need an order, I suppose, for this, eh?
Yep.
Why are you laughing?
Who? Not me. I'm not
Who?
laughing. I said,
Christina was laughing.
Oh.
What?
Why are you laughing, Christina?
I'm trying to make sure I'm peaking at the right decibel count.
Don't peek too early.
You're peaking every time you speak. It's so loud.
I'm actually a little low decibel-wise, but I think we're going to keep the peace here. 261 resolutions. Okay, what's the order here? We've got 11, Nana, Challengers, exclamation mark, I think, with an exclamation mark, and Zoo Vadis, which is the hottest.
To be clear, Zoo Vadis does not have a question mark, unlike its predecessor, Quo Vadis.
Oh, wow, that's...
So when you're adding in those exclamations and just don't put a question mark. Very important.
You should save it. You should... I feel like Mark.
Wait, how do you feel like
Save
me?
it for the show.
Oh, yeah, save it for the show. That's right. Yeah, that's comedy gold game. So this, I think it... Oh, Misty. Intruder alert. We'd call it overseas. And as a manager / co-a, who's everybody laughing?
I'm sorry. I don't know if you could
I
hear
wasn't
it.
sure if that was a joke, but it's hilarious.
In the background, Misty is just like...
I didn't hear it.
That. I just genuinely found director of football, whatever, as that's what they were called to in the
Players to your team and hopefully trading them up. The way this works is... Oh, I've got a dog situation myself here. Can you hear that?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Just barely.
Okay.
Okay. Nana is a adorable card. Sorry. All right. Nana
You're
is...
listening to your voice for this?
Yeah, whenever I go, I listen to my voice.
Okay.
Nana is a...
More about that later. First of all, as an aside, cut me off when I get to, like, it's boring or whatever. Okay.
I'll cut you off right there.
Okay. Perfect. Then I have...